September 11th, 2001 began like any other ordinary morning in the United States. The skies above New York were clear, commuters filled the streets, office workers carried coffee into tall buildings that symbolized ambition and progress. No one imagined that within hours, the nation would experience one of the most defining moments in its history. It was a calm Tuesday. In Manhattan, the World Trade Center stood as a symbol of American strength and economic power. Nearly 50,000 people worked in and around the towers every day. Tourists visited the observation decks. For decades, the towers had represented confidence in the future. Across the country, Americans followed their morning routines. Children prepared for school, families listened to the news, airports operated as usual, nothing seemed out of place. The sense of security that defined everyday life remained unquestioned. At 8:46 a.m., that sense of normalcy was shattered. American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. At first, confusion filled the air. Many believed it was a tragic accident. Smoke poured from the upper floors. Sirens echoed through the streets of New York. People looked up in disbelief. Office workers gathered near windows. Pedestrians stopped in the streets trying to understand what they were witnessing. Emergency services began moving toward the towers. Firefighters and police officers prepared for what they believed was a devastating but isolated disaster. 17 minutes later, at 9:03 a.m., a second plane struck the South Tower. United Airlines Flight 175 hit with terrifying speed. In that moment, confusion turned into certainty. The United States was under attack. Across the country, television broadcasts switched to live coverage. Americans watched in shock as images of the burning towers filled their screens. For many, it felt unreal. The idea that such an attack could occur on American soil seemed impossible, yet it was happening in real time. If you enjoy real history documentaries like this, consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps bring more true stories from history to life. Emergency responders rushed into the towers without hesitation. Firefighters climbed stairwells filled with smoke. Police officers guided civilians toward exits. Paramedics prepared for mass casualties. While thousands attempted to escape, hundreds moved toward danger, determined to save lives. Inside the buildings, conditions worsened rapidly. Smoke filled corridors. Elevators stopped working. Communication systems began to fail, yet many continued helping one another. Strangers guided strangers. Colleagues refused to leave without their teams. On the streets below, crowds gathered in shock. Some stood frozen, staring upward. Others began to run as debris fell from the sky. The scale of the attack was becoming impossible to comprehend. What had begun as a normal morning had transformed into a national emergency. Far from New York, the impact of the attack spread quickly. Air traffic across the United States was grounded. Flights were redirected or forced to land immediately. Airports fell silent. For the first time in history, American airspace was effectively shut down. At 9:37 a.m., another plane struck the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Smoke rose from the headquarters of the U.S. military. The realization deepened. This was not a single attack. It was a coordinated assault on the United States. Fear and uncertainty spread across the nation. Government buildings were evacuated. Military forces were placed on high alert. Leaders were moved to secure locations. Americans everywhere searched for information, trying to understand what would happen next. As news spread, millions of Americans remained glued to their televisions. Offices paused. Schools turned on live broadcasts. Stores fell silent as employees and customers watched the same images together. A shared sense of shock united the country in a way few events ever had. In New York, evacuation efforts intensified. Thousands moved through stairwells, descending floor by floor. Firefighters continued climbing upward, passing exhausted civilians on their way down. Many paused only long enough to offer reassurance before continuing toward the upper floors. The scale of the emergency overwhelmed communication systems. Phone lines became jammed. Families tried desperately to reach loved ones working in the towers. Messages went unanswered. Uncertainty deepened with every passing minute. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed. In less than 10 seconds, the massive structure fell into itself. A cloud of dust and debris surged through the streets of Manhattan. Those nearby ran for safety as visibility disappeared. The collapse stunned not only New York, but the entire nation. 17 minutes later, at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower also collapsed. The skyline of New York changed forever. Where the towers once stood, smoke and ash filled the air. For many watching live, the moment felt unreal. Two of the most recognizable buildings in the world had vanished within hours. Across the United States, silence followed. The magnitude of what had happened was still difficult to grasp. News anchors struggled to find words. Witnesses spoke through tears. Viewers watched in disbelief as the the reality of the attack settled in. Meanwhile, another flight had been hijacked. United Airlines Flight 93 never reached its intended target. Passengers, aware of the earlier attacks, made a collective decision. They refused to allow the aircraft to be used as another weapon. Their actions would soon become one of the most powerful stories of that day. On board Flight 93, passengers began making phone calls to their families. Through these calls, they learned about the attacks in New York and Washington. The realization was immediate. Their plane was part of the same coordinated assault. Silence turned into determination as they understood the stakes. Rather than waiting for the inevitable, the passengers chose to act. Working together, they formed a plan to confront the hijackers. In those final moments, ordinary individuals displayed extraordinary courage. Their actions would prevent further devastation and save countless lives on the ground. At 10:03 a.m., Flight 93 crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. Though all on board were lost, the aircraft never reached its intended target. The bravery shown by the passengers became a symbol of unity and sacrifice. Across the country, their story spread as a reminder of resilience in the face of terror. As the morning progressed, emergency response efforts intensified. Rescue teams moved toward Lower Manhattan from every direction. Firefighters, police officers, and volunteers worked through smoke and debris. Their mission was simple and urgent: search for survivors and provide aid wherever possible. Hospitals across New York prepared for large numbers of injured. Medical staff stood ready. Ambulances lined the streets. Yet as hours passed, the scale of loss became increasingly clear. The focus shifted from rescue to recovery. Government leaders addressed the nation. Their messages were brief but direct. Americans were urged to remain calm, vigilant, and united. In a moment of deep uncertainty, reassurance became essential. The country needed stability as it processed the enormity of the attacks. Throughout the day, images from New York continued to dominate television screens. Smoke rising over the city, first responders moving through debris, citizens helping one another. These scenes became etched into the national memory. Air travel remained grounded across the United States. Airports stood nearly empty. For the first time in decades, the skies above the country were quiet. The silence served as a powerful reminder that something unprecedented had occurred. In cities across the nation, people gathered in public spaces. Some prayed, others stood together in silence. Flags appeared in windows and on buildings. A shared sense of unity began to emerge from the shock and fear. As evening approached on September 11th, the United States entered a moment of reflection. The events of the day had altered the national mood in ways few could fully describe. For many, time seemed to slow. Ordinary routines no longer felt ordinary. Every conversation centered on what had happened and what it meant for the future. In New York, smoke continued to rise from Lower Manhattan. Emergency lights illuminated streets covered in dust and debris. First responders worked tirelessly through the night. Volunteers arrived from across the region, offering food, water, and assistance to those in need. A spirit of unity began to form amid the devastation. Families across the country gathered around televisions and radios. Parents tried to explain the events to their children. Many struggled to find the right words. The sense of safety that had once felt permanent now seemed fragile. Americans realized that the world had changed in a single morning. In Washington, government officials assessed the situation. Security measures increased nationwide. Military forces remained on alert. Airspace restrictions continued. Leaders understood that the response to the attacks would shape the country for years to come. The following days brought a mixture of grief and determination. Memorials appeared in cities and small towns alike. Flowers covered sidewalks. Candles were lit in public squares. Moments of silence united millions of people who had never met but shared the same sense of loss. Yet alongside grief came resilience. Communities supported one another. Strangers offered comfort. Flags appeared on homes, cars, and buildings across the nation. The display of unity became one of the defining images of that time. Across the United States, stories of heroism emerged. Firefighters who entered the towers without hesitation, police officers who guided civilians to safety, medical workers who treated the injured for hours without rest, ordinary citizens who helped strangers escape danger. These stories reminded the nation of its strength. As investigations began, attention turned toward understanding how the attacks had occurred. Security systems were reviewed, air travel procedures were examined, intelligence agencies analyzed every detail. The goal was clear: prevent such an event from ever happening again. The attacks of September 11th were not only a tragedy, they marked a turning point. Policies changed, security measures increased, international relations shifted. The United States entered a new era defined by vigilance and adaptation. In the weeks that followed, the United States began to process the full scale of what had happened. The loss of life was immense. Nearly 3,000 people had been killed in a single morning. Families mourned loved ones. Communities organized memorials. The nation entered a period of collective grief unlike any in recent memory. New York City became a place of remembrance. Photographs of the missing covered walls and fences. Candles burned day and night. Volunteers offered support to families searching for answers. The streets near Ground Zero transformed into spaces of reflection and solidarity. Across the country, Americans found ways to honor those who had been lost. Moments of silence were observed in schools, workplaces, and public events. Churches and community centers filled with people seeking comfort. The shared experience of grief created a sense of unity that crossed all differences. At the same time, the nation began preparing for its response. Leaders spoke about resilience and determination. Security agencies worked to strengthen defenses. The idea of national safety took on new urgency. Protecting the country became a central focus of policy and planning. Air travel changed dramatically. Airport security increased. New procedures were introduced. Passengers experienced stricter screenings and heightened awareness. The simplicity of pre-2001 travel disappeared, replaced by a system shaped by caution. In New York, recovery and rebuilding efforts slowly began. Engineers and workers cleared debris from the site where the towers once stood. The process would take months. Every step served as a reminder of what had been lost and what needed to be rebuilt. Despite the devastation, the United States did not retreat from the world. Instead, it adapted. The country examined its vulnerabilities and worked to strengthen its institutions. From tragedy came a renewed sense of purpose and determination. As the years passed, September 11th remained a defining moment. Memorials were built, ceremonies were held each year, names were read aloud to ensure that those who were lost would never be forgotten. The memory of that day became part of the national identity. Younger generations learned about the events through stories and education. Teachers explained where they had been that morning. Parents shared personal memories. The lessons of unity, resilience, and vigilance continued to shape how Americans viewed the world. The attacks of 2001 changed more than policies and security measures. They changed how a nation understood itself. They revealed vulnerability, but also extraordinary strength. They showed that even in the face of tragedy, unity could emerge. In the decades since that morning, the legacy of September 11th has remained deeply woven into American history. For those who witnessed it live, the memories remain vivid. For those born later, the stories continue to shape their understanding of the world. The events of that day became more than a historical moment. They became a lasting reminder of how quickly life can change. Each year, on September 11th, ceremonies are held across the United States. Names of the victims are read aloud. Moments of silence are observed. Families gather at memorial sites. These traditions ensure that the lives lost are never reduced to numbers. They remain part of a shared national memory. In New York, the memorial built at the site of the former World Trade Center stands as a symbol of remembrance. Water flows continuously into reflecting pools where the towers once stood. Visitors move quietly through the space, reading names and reflecting on the past. The memorial serves not only as a tribute, but as a place of understanding. The impact of that day also shaped how the United States approached security and global relations. New policies were introduced, alliances were strengthened, the concept of national safety took on new meaning. While debates about these changes continue, the influence of September 11th remains undeniable. Yet beyond policy and security, the deeper legacy lies in resilience. Communities rebuilt, families supported one another, first responders continued to serve with dedication. A nation that had faced a moment of profound shock chose not to withdraw, but to move forward. If you appreciate calm, real history documentaries that explore moments like this, subscribe to the channel. Your support allows more stories like this to be told with clarity and respect. Looking back, September 11th stands as one of the most significant turning points in modern American history. It tested the nation's sense of safety and its confidence in the future, but it also revealed the strength found in unity and shared purpose. From the chaos of that morning emerged countless acts of courage. From the shock came determination. From the loss came remembrance. And from remembrance came a commitment to ensure that such a day would never be forgotten. The United States changed after September 11th. Its policies evolved, its priorities shifted, but its fundamental character remained grounded in resilience. In moments of uncertainty, the nation continued to adapt and endure. This is America misjudged. When the world watches closely in moments of crisis, it often sees only vulnerability, but history repeatedly shows something more enduring. A nation tested does not simply collapse, it learns, it adapts, and it moves forward.